participation at the COP28. Honorable Prime Minister will deliver his address at the opening session of the World Climate Action Summit. Besides his address to the COP28, Prime Minister will also be participating in three high-level side events, of which two are being co-hosted by India. The first high-level event, which is being co-hosted by India and the UAE, is the launch of Green Credits Initiative. If you would recall, this was something which was rolled out earlier this month or late last month by the Ministry of Environment in India. The Green Credits Initiative is based on the Green Credit Program, which was notified by the Ministry of Environment in October this year, and basically envisions the issue of green credits for plantations on waste and degraded lands and the river catchment areas in order to restore their vitality. The second side event, co-hosted by India and Sweden, is the launch of Lead IT 2.0, essentially a leadership group for energy transition. You're not able to hear? All right. Sure. The second event, which is co-hosted by India and Sweden, is the launch of Lead IT 2.0, leadership group for industry transition. Recall was a joint initiative launched by India and Sweden in 2019 at the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. Essentially, this initiative fosters collaboration among the decision makers, bringing together both the public sector and the private sector with the objective of accelerating the industry transition to net zero emissions, essentially from heavy industries. Honorable Prime Minister will also be participating in another high-level event, which is titled Transforming Climate Finance, which is to be hosted by the presidency of the COP28, that is the UAE. In terms of substance, as you all know, the Conference of the Parties, COP, is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC that meets annually to assess progress in dealing with climate change, also discuss and negotiate further actions that the parties to the COP have to take, and make decisions on global climate action. Previously, Prime Minister has attended two climate conferences, COP21 in Paris in November 2015, where the historic Paris Agreement was concluded. And you would recall that International Solar Alliance was launched at the announcement of Panchamrit, outlining the 5 key elements of India's action aimed at environment conservation and climate protection. Converting these announcements into action, India submitted its enhanced NDCs, nationally determined contributions, before COP27, and also submitted a long-term development strategy, the few large economies which are on track to meet its nationally determined contributions. Also noteworthy that in recent years, under the vision and personal guidance of Honorable Prime Minister, India has taken a leadership role in shaping the global agenda on climate and environment, including through focusing on this issue in the 2 Voice of Global South Summit organized by India, first in January this year, and most recently, the one earlier this month. India's approach to climate action is deeply rooted in our civilizational ethos and is reflected foremost in our contributions and our ambitious and effective national policies, especially those which are aimed at economic development, energy, health, and nutrition. We have also been pioneering and in the forefront in taking global initiatives in fighting climate change and its impacts. These initiatives include, as I just said, launch of International Solar Alliance in COP15, and the alliance has now grown to be a truly international framework. Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is another such global initiative. Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, and Mission Life. And the most recently in September this year, on the sidelines of the G20 summit, the launch of the Global Biofuel Alliance. Our approach to climate action is also reflected efforts to help the rest of global south in combating this serious challenge of climate change, as also its impact on the development framework of the developing countries. We have engaged, as you all know, very actively in the multilateral negotiations under the UNFCCC, and our approach has been to preserve an effective, cooperative, and equitable global architecture based on climate justice and the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. CBDRE RC. Most recently, India has been, as I said, been able to mainstream this discourse during the G20 presidency. Several of the decisions in the New Delhi Declaration reflect the discourse initiated, led by India, and various factors of our initiatives reflected in its decision, but also through the True Voice of Global South Summit. We have seen Green Development Pact, which was mentioned in the New Delhi Declaration, but also another accomplishment of the launch of Global Biofuel Alliance, which I just mentioned. This visit and the participation of Honorable Prime Minister at the COP28 would also give us another opportunity to further advance Prime Minister's vision on this very important issue of climate change. I would stop here, and if there are questions, we'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll open the floor for questions. Please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. When do I start with the show?
Morning, Foreign Secretary. This is Risha from Times Now. So, apart from this summit event, are we looking at any bilateral from our side with the leaders who are visiting for COP28 tomorrow in Dubai?
Go ahead.
So Siddhant from Beyond. Sir, India has been pointing out that how the West has failed in its commitment regarding climate finance, how much that will be focused during the Prime Minister's engagement and addresses at these the events.
Yeah, go ahead. Microphone to you. Yeah.
Hi, sir. It's Christian this side from Reuters. I have a two-pronged question, sir. What is India's position on the recommendations made by Transition Committee 5 on the Loss and Damage Fund? Will India support its adoption today? And second, France and US are likely to propose a halt in private finance of coal-fired power projects, actually. India, on the other hand, needs coal power and is rushing to have more plants to meet unprecedented demand. What will be India's stand on coal exit in COP28?
Yeah, next year. Go ahead.
So, Dhairya Maheshwari, Sputnik India. My question is on there was a recent UN report which called for intensifying the GHG emission cuts. So, does India support the developed countries advancing their GHG emission timelines, which are 2050 at present? Thank you, sir.
Okay, if not, we'll take this round of questions. I would also, before handing over the floor to some of these, are prejudging not just the visit, but the discussions in COP, particularly Christian, to your comments or even the other ones. There's a process. People are going there for 2 weeks to negotiate various important documents, but I will let Foreign Secretary ask.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the question of bilaterals. Yes, Honorable Prime Minister will have a set of bilateral meetings with many of his counterparts. We will keep you briefed about those meetings and the discussions that take place during those meetings as they progress. With regard to the focus on climate finance, and some of it is perhaps in a way linked partly, not necessarily entirely, to the question on the loss and damage fund, which was asked by Reuters. Look, one of the key objectives for us, and we all know this, this has always been our clear perspective and priority, that climate finance and also climate technology is a very, very crucial segment of all the global efforts in addressing this challenge of environmental degradation. We expect a clear roadmap to be agreed at COP28 on climate finance, which would be important for delivering on the new collective quantified goals, which is NCQG at COP29. I have already mentioned in my opening remarks that Honorable Prime Minister is also scheduled to participate in a high-level presidency event, which is focused exclusively on climate finance. The outcome of that event is under discussion by the principal participants at that event, and we will. It would be useful for those interested on this entire ecosystem of climate action issues, in particular climate finance, I would say even climate technology, to perhaps follow that event closely. In a way, the loss and damage part, we have always been interested in finding a successful outcome on operationalizing the loss and damage fund. This has always been very upfront in terms of our articulation. We think this will be of great benefit to the developing countries by providing them with potentially a new source of financial support to address the loss and damage aspect related to this. With regard to the question on coal and how it is positioned, look, if you look at not just the articulation of India's position, India's belief, and India's action related to climate change, and I would particularly draw your attention to the Panchamrit 5 principles that the Honorable Prime Minister announced at the COP26, and I'll just sort of put this up front here in order to draw a proper correlation to how is coal looked at. One was to reduce the emission intensity of India's GDP by 45% by 2030 from 2005 level. One. Two, to achieve 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030. Three, to achieve 1 billion ton reductions in the projected emissions between then, when it was announced, and 2030. And to achieve 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy capacity by 2030. And of course, what I said earlier, achieve net zero by the year 2070. If you were to analyze each of these actions which the Prime Minister had outlined at COP26, you will clearly see India's commitment to look at, focus at, take targeted action towards green energy. Having said that, coal is and would remain an important part of India's energy mix. It has always been, as we move forward to meet our developmental priorities in the country. with regard to the greenhouse emission timelines, I've already clearly mentioned to you what our enunciated goals and priorities are. I would essentially mention one more point here, which is important to keep in mind, which is related to the how the question of emission timelines gets linked to the nationally determined contributions. As I said, we are among the very few major economies that is well on its track to complete its obligated NDCs. In fact, I'm sure you would, if you follow this closely, you would know we had announced upgraded NDCs last year. And I'm very happy to say that we are now well on our way even to meet those upgraded NDC targets which we had announced last year. So we are among the few economies which is well on its way to meet NDC. We are proactive in taking practical climate action measures and basing them on a very firm conceptual understanding and a very firm belief that our development has to be green development, while at the same time it also should triangulate well with your own development priorities in the country.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I see more hands. Okay.
Morning, sir. Sridhar from the Asian Age. So I was just wondering, you outlined the big ticket announcements that were made by the PM at COP26 at Glasgow, and you said some upgraded NDCs were also announced last year. Any fresh set of such nationally determined goals, which are they likely to figure in the PM's opening remarks? And secondly, we saw during the Ukraine-Russia crisis the pressure on the fossil